Excellent. We are back. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our final session. Again, we hope you're finding a lot of information and useful tidbits that you can take away from today's content. I know I've definitely been fast and furious writing notes over here, and I am definitely going to be saying light my sparkler a whole lot going forward. So, thank you to everyone who's joined us so far. I'm really excited for you guys to meet our next speaker, who is Dr. Megha Poddar. Um, Dr. Poddar is an endocrinologist and obesity medicine specialist. She is another one of those fantastic A-bomb certified physicians. She was also a contributor to the 2020 Canadian Obesity Clinical Practice Guidelines, which, as we have said, are framing a lot of our conversation today. She does a lot of amazing things, and her research is primarily focused on type 2 diabetes, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. And she's been a principal investigator for some clinical trials that are involving some pretty fascinating things. She's a magnificent human, and she is all about being patient-centered and really improving healthcare, and has come up with some fantastic educational tools. She's a global mentor on obesity care, and we are so lucky to have her join us here today. So thank you for joining us and helping us kind of put all these pieces together, Megha. And with that, I'll let you take over and lead the way through the pillars of obesity management and how they fit together.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa, for that kind introduction. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around. I know it's been an amazing day, but it can be hard to kind of sit through a lot of these talks throughout the whole day. So I appreciate the fact that you're still here and the opportunity to speak with you today. I know you've had an excellent day already. You've had tons of discussions ranging from behavioral treatments, medications, surgery. Really, what I hope to do is help to put it all together. I really want you to leave today with a good understanding of what the obesity landscape is like here in Canada, and really to get you excited just about all the different treatment options that are available and where things are headed for obesity management. So if we could get my slides up, perfect. And we'll move to the next slide. So let's really start at the beginning, a discussion on what the current landscape looks like. This data that I have up is actually from 2015 from the World Health Organization. You may have seen it actually already today. And really, unfortunately, what it shows is that worldwide since 1980, the rates of obesity have doubled, which means that more than half of the world's adult population is living with obesity. That was back in 2014. I'm not sure if many of you had seen, but the World Obesity Federation put out an atlas, which was looking at the projections of what was going to happen with obesity in 2030. And unfortunately, we haven't done much better. We really haven't moved the needle in terms of preventing obesity. And really what that projection showed was that 1 billion adults worldwide by 2030 will have obesity. Here in Canada, we're not really immune to those statistics. Back in 2015, 6 million Canadians were living with obesity. By 2030, that's going to double to 12 million. So, that's the reason we're all here today. I think everybody sort of on the line today knows that this is a problem and recognizes that this is a challenge. But I really sort of implore you to ask yourself, why is this happening? What is making the obesity epidemic worse instead of better, given the fact that we've known about it for decades and we've really sort of talked about treatment options for such a long time, but we haven't yet been able to move the needle to improve things. And it doesn't look like things are improving based off the projections for the future. Next slide. Whenever I ask this question, I think the answer around something to do with technology does tend to come up. And we know that technology is a major player. Now, it sort of depends on how you're defining the word technology. When I think about technology and obesity, I really think about back with the Industrial Revolution. Really, that changed the way that we as human beings lived. All of a sudden, we had to do very little physically to accomplish more and more of our day-to-day tasks. And really, socially, we sort of celebrate that, right? The ability to do more and more on smaller and smaller devices, that's a win in general. And we feel proud as human beings that we've accomplished so much. But of course, this has sort of led to us make it for us to be harder to actually move our bodies. Technology has also revolutionized the way that we eat, though. The simple advent of nitrogen, really made it so that we were no longer worried about food scarcity, which was really important since our population was growing to reduce poverty. But the further and further that we processed food, the cheaper and cheaper we made it. Unfortunately, the content and the quality of food also changed. And much of our food actually heightens our body's desire to want to store calories and keep weight on. On the other hand, though, technology has really empowered us to be able to do so much when it comes to obesity treatment. Really, technology is the reason why we're able to actually treat obesity today. Whether you think about it in terms of decreasing complications from bariatric surgery, or you can think about it as developing new molecules for the medications that we're using to treat obesity. Really, these are more and more effective molecules with less and less side effects. That's a huge win in terms of our ability to treat. Since the pandemic, we've also been using technology. We're using technology right now to be able to communicate with each other. But really, it really allowed us to improve access for obesity management tools. So whether it was virtual medicine or health trackers or blood sugar sensors, these tools are now readily available in our toolbox, which means that we are able to reach far more people than we ever were before in terms of access to treatment and access to obesity management specialists, for example. Next slide. Now, of course, we know that obesity is not just rising because of our environment, right? We know that the causes of obesity are far more complicated than how many calories we eat and how many calories we burn when we move our body. Of course, it's a combination of genetic, physiological, psychological, socioeconomic. All of these different things are playing a role in terms of determining why somebody's body allows them to lose weight versus somebody's body holding on to weight. And this is really the reason why we need to individualize treatment. Everybody's story is unique. Everybody's treatment is going to be unique. And this is the reason why we need different types of treatment. Whether one medication, is able to be effective with weight loss doesn't mean that it's going to be effective for everyone. And so the ability to actually have different tools in our toolbox is really important because the causes of obesity are so complicated. And kind of going back to the conversation around technology, I know that eventually we're going to be able to identify the exact cause for why somebody's weight is staying high, what hormone is playing a role, or whether it's their metabolic rate, what are the exact reasons and causes, and give them targeted treatment. But certainly, in terms of individualized treatment, we're still in the early phases of that. Next slide. This is also the reason why we don't rely just on weight. Just simply calculating weight and height and coming up with a BMI, that's no longer the way that we diagnose obesity anymore. You've probably heard that already many times throughout today's session. We know that the weight or the number on the scale is not an accurate measure of health. You could be a football player who has a lot of lean muscle mass, which is quite heavy, and be at a BMI criteria that meets the criteria for obesity, but you're able to run a half marathon. Now, as a healthcare provider, should we really be concerned about your heart health or your risk of diabetes or high blood pressure just because your BMI is high? Well, no, we need to look at the person in their entirety and really move away from defining obesity just based off of BMI and moving more towards really asking, how much is this weight impacting your physical, mental, and metabolic health? And what are the risk factors for you to have problems in the future? And let's look at those as being the outcomes for what we're looking for successful treatment. Yes, reducing weight is going to be a part of that and important, but really we've shifted away from looking at the weight as being the sole goal and more towards impacting those health outcomes that are specific to the patient. Next slide. And so this is one of the main reasons why we updated the clinical practice guidelines. The last update was back in 2006. And truthfully, back then, we weren't even diagnosing obesity properly. We were relying more on the BMI than this other full sort of understanding. We also have had many new treatments that have become available since 2006. And so I wanted to just bring back this concept. I understand that Lisa sort of mentioned that the guidelines have been weaved in throughout all the conversations today, which is perfect because I sort of want to bring it home by highlighting three main concepts around the clinical practice guidelines. The biggest one that we want to try and emphasize is that obesity treatment should focus on health and not solely on weight. The second point is that most people with obesity have lived through some form of negative experience related to their weight. We need to recognize that, acknowledge that, and help to manage that internalized bias. The last point is that we have safe and effective treatment available for patients living with obesity, and really it should be offered to all patients that meet that criteria. My last comment about the guidelines is that, yes, it was written for healthcare providers, mainly primary healthcare providers, but it was also written for patients. Every single chapter in the guideline has key messages for people living with obesity. So if you're one of those people and you're interested in learning more about it and you haven't had the chance already, I would really encourage you to have a look at the clinical practice guidelines and read those key messages. Because when you're having conversations about obesity with somebody who perhaps doesn't understand it, having that information in your back pocket that is coming directly from the clinical practice guidelines, it really gives you that strength to know that you're right, the confidence to be able to have that conversation. But we also know that a lot of the advocacy is coming directly from patients. And so the clinical practice guidelines is really trying to boost the confidence to say, here is a tool that you can use to have that conversation. Next slide. So you've probably seen this today already. This is what the new updated sort of treatment model looks like. So back in 2006, in our previous guidelines, what the treatment model used to look like was a simple triangle, kind of like the Canada Food Guide pyramid, where at the bottom of that triangle, there was diet and exercise or lifestyle modification. Then the next rung up was medications, and then the last rung up was bariatric surgery. What this led people to think is that, you have to fail sort of diet and exercise or have it not work. Then you can move to medications. Then you can move to bariatric surgery as a last resort. We've really moved away from that concept because, one, we know that people need different tools and many tools altogether, but it's not a stepwise approach. We've really moved away from that pyramid to looking at this sort of house type picture. The roof of the house, you can see, highlights nutritional therapy and physical activity. That is for every single person. It doesn't matter how old you are, what you weigh, or what your health looks like. Having a conversation on nutrition and physical exercise is important for health regardless. But we understand that these are not actual true treatments for obesity. Because our body is fighting against weight loss, our biology is set up for us to defend our highest weight. We need treatment that actually fights that biology. And diet and exercise alone does not do that. Psychological intervention or cognitive behavioral therapy, medications, and surgery specifically target our body's desire to want to keep our weight up, which is why those are the three pillars and the three treatments that are actually needed for obesity success. Next slide. So you've probably heard this already today, but I wanted to summarize it. This concept of obesity as a chronic disease. The first thing that a patient does when they walk into my office is we have this explanation or this education session on why is obesity a chronic disease. And really, the summary of it is that every time we eat less calories and we try and exercise for our body to be able to reduce weight, our biology kicks in. Our body says, wait a second, this is a bad thing. 100 years ago, this would mean that we were dying. It would mean that we have a scarcity of food. And our body needs to flip a switch to be able to do whatever it can to survive. What does that mean? It means that it changes our hormones so that we're physically more hungry, so we go out and get more food. It changes our metabolism so we burn less calories so we can survive longer on less nutrition. So you can imagine that 100 years ago, this was really important for human beings to be able to survive on this planet. Our environment has changed dramatically, but our biology is still exactly the same. And so what we call obesity is this fact of our biology really defending and keeping our weight as high as possible. Next slide. So really, this is the concept of the obesity life cycle, right? So if you were to gain weight, you try your best in terms of reducing your calories and increasing your exercise. What does this do? Your body flips a switch and it says, "Uh-oh, I need to change my hunger hormones. I need to decrease my metabolism." And then, even though you're eating really well and you're sticking with your plan, you may experience a plateau initially and then eventually weight regain. And of course, this is going to make most people feel like failures or something's wrong with them or not understanding what's happening with their body. And then those feelings of failure lead to internalized bias. And then we're back in our cycle of weight gain again. And so, next slide. And so, what are we talking about for treatments is these three treatments, these three pillars break that cycle. This is why real treatment works and why diet and exercise doesn't. Psychological intervention or cognitive behavioral therapy, it fights our brain's learned behavior around food. It tries and fights against the addictive nature of processed foods and the reason why we eat instead of what we eat. Medications are really effective because they fight against the biology of those hormonal changes. So when our physiology or our hormones that are making us more hungry are going up, we can use medications to actually fight that hunger. Bariatric surgery is similar. Most people think that bariatric surgery is just a surgery to make your stomach physically smaller so that you eat less food, but it's actually a hormone corrective surgery. Hormones like GLP-1 actually increase almost tenfold after bariatric surgery. Those are the same hormones that go down when we lose weight and the same hormones that we use in medications to actually treat obesity. And so, when people are often saying, well, I just need to try harder, or I'm not motivated enough with my diet and my exercise plan. Well, it's really not a conversation around motivation. It's really more, what is your body doing? And do you have the right treatment on board to be able for you to actually be successful? Because we need to fight that biology. Next slide. And so, what's super exciting is that we have more and more tools in our toolbox to help with treatment options. You've had a conversation around medications already, but there's more medications available now to manage weight than we've ever had before. And the most important piece is that our treatments are more and more effective with less and less side effects. So you can sort of see on this graph here, behavioral intervention, which is essentially diet and exercise, the average amount of weight loss that we would see with diet and exercise because of those biology reasons we just talked about is a 1 to 5% of your total body weight loss. And unfortunately, we, typically need to see about 5 to 10% weight loss to see improvements in medical issues like diabetes and high blood pressure, which is the reason why we haven't been successful at reducing the rates of those other chronic diseases with diet and exercise alone. You can see at the bottom with behavioral changes and surgery, surgery is still generally our most effective tool in terms of losing about 20 to 40% of your total body weight loss. And really what this translates to is more effective diabetes control, more effective reduction in heart disease, and actually has been shown to reduce mortality, so number of deaths after bariatric surgery. Now, previously, our medications, really, we would say on average about 5 to 10% weight reduction is what we were seeing with most of our medications. But our newer medications, we're seeing now 10, 15, 20% weight reduction. So, what this is really meaning is that some of our newer options are actually overlapping with the same benefit that bariatric surgery would allow, with certainly less risk of, saving a patient from having to go to surgery. And from our perspective, this is, a life-saving tool, and we're super excited to eventually be able to use these. As many of you know, in Canada, we're still waiting for some of the newer agents like Wegovy to come to Canada, but it has been Health Canada approved. So once those are available, we know that for our patients that are struggling with other risk factors related to their weight, having them on these newer treatments is going to be a very effective way to actually finally treat obesity and improve overall health. Next slide. So you've probably already heard today about, some of the complications of obesity. We know that these are the reasons why most of us seek medical attention. Most of our doctors are happily able to treat diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, fatty liver, certain cancers, infertility. All of these things are direct complications of obesity. And given the data that I spoke with you when I first started about the doubling rates of obesity in our society, really there's no way that our healthcare system can keep up with all these chronic diseases, especially if they're getting worse and worse. But if you take a step back, we know that investing in obesity and treating obesity is actually treating all these other individual chronic diseases. Now, I'll be the first to say that access to obesity treatment, is not great. There's still not great coverage for medications. They may be safe and effective, but they're expensive, and, there may not be great access to them. And there's long wait times for specialist clinics. But probably the biggest barrier to treatment is actually this concept of stigma and bias. Most of the time when we approach rule makers, whether it's the government or other people that are deciding whether obesity treatment should be available or not, most people still feel that obesity is a lifestyle problem. And really, as healthcare providers, we don't have great funding and support like we would with other chronic diseases. And that's one of the biggest calls to action that I wanted to leave you here with today, is that we need to sort of move the needle in understanding obesity as a chronic disease and lift it up to have at least as much support as we do in our healthcare system for other chronic diseases. Next slide. So, this is why we are here today. This is why we're using the platform of World Obesity Day. We want to really empower you with the knowledge to sort of correct the misinformation. And this can be in your own backyard, whether it's a family member, it could be your employer or an HR representative, it could be your own doctor. But we know that bias against obesity exists, and you will encounter it. So hopefully you can leave today's session sort of knowing what you can say in these situations when you hear misinformation around obesity being a lifestyle disease, or, treatment is an easy way out, that sort of thing. Because really we all need to advocate for ourselves. I think that's going to be the biggest way to move the needle forward, is to be able to, have that conversation, have the knowledge in your back pocket, and be able to empower yourself with that. Next slide. My last quick point about bias and stigma. We know that other people have bias and stigma around people with obesity. They treat them differently. They offer them less opportunity. They make them feel less worthy. But when this becomes a problem is when people with obesity believe it themselves. And this is the concept around internalized weight bias. When we start to believe that we don't deserve treatment, we stop advocating for ourselves, and we stop speaking up, and we stop improving our access to treatment. And so one of the biggest things that I want to give you today is the ability to say that obesity is a chronic disease and start to peel back the layers of understanding some of that negative attitude that we have towards ourselves. This is actually the biggest barrier to successful treatment. It doesn't matter what treatment you undergo, if you have internalized bias, your success with obesity treatment is going to be less. The other point I'd like to make is if you're seeking support with a healthcare provider around obesity, just make sure it's a safe environment that recognizes internalized bias and make sure it's an environment that gives you the tools to break these barriers down. Last slide. So, I just want to sort of sum up to say that we are our biggest advocates. And so how do we do that? Coming to sessions like this is one of the first steps. Joining Obesity Canada, it's a great community and great environment to learn about new things that are happening. I think 2023 and 2024 are going to be pretty remarkable for new treatments that are going to be available throughout these next couple of years. And so staying abreast of those things through Obesity Canada is probably the number one step. Speaking with your HR representatives if lack of coverage is a problem for medications or pharmacotherapy. Have a conversation with your HR representatives. Have your doctors be able to send you, give you a note or advocate on your behalf. Speak with your MP. These are the decision makers at the end of the day who's going to decide how many resources are available for us to treat obesity as a disease. If you have a voice, make it louder so that we can all sort of heighten ourselves and be able to improve access. Arm yourself with knowledge. That's why you're here today. I would encourage you to look at the clinical practice guidelines if you haven't already. And just a point to note that, I think a lot of my patients have had negative experiences with their own healthcare providers. So I can imagine that there's a little bit of a barrier in terms of putting yourself in a vulnerable position if you've had a negative experience. So if you're out there seeking help, I would just make sure that it's the right healthcare provider. There are obesity clinic locators on Obesity Canada to make sure that your healthcare provider is affiliated with the right sort of conversation, but just make sure that you have that extra protection for yourself. And next slide. Great. So thank you everyone for joining us today and listening to me as the last sort of speaker. I would love to answer any questions and happy to have a bit of a chat.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I think you did a great job at kind of pulling everything together, and I know we've shared a lot today, so that was really helpful. And we absolutely do have some questions in the chat as well that we can get to, but cannot thank you enough as well for shouting out the advocacy side of things, because we've said it a few times today, and I will say it again and again. We matter, and our votes count, our dollars matter. Let's show up, let's make ourselves known and ask for what we deserve, frankly, as 100%. Well. All right, so let's go to a question here, and this is interesting because the first two kind of reflect each other. What should someone do if our doctor says, I don't believe in obesity medications or bariatric surgery? All you need to do is focus on diet and exercise.
Thank you so much for asking that, because boy, do we see that. And I know that certainly by the time a patient has come to me, they've encountered that many times. So, I think that the challenge is that your healthcare provider is still your healthcare provider, and you want to maintain a relationship for the most part with that healthcare provider for other aspects of your health. I would say that the way to approach it is asking them if there's somebody else that you can send them to. Because there are people that can have this conversation with you, and that treatment exists, and you're asking this question for a reason. If your own healthcare provider isn't supportive yet, I would encourage you to ask for a referral. And there are specialists out there like us who are more than happy to start this conversation at the beginning. And the one key thing that a lot of us have been doing since the beginning is sending back information to your healthcare provider. Because yes, you've gone through this negative experience, which is really unfortunate, but hey, how can we use that to prevent the next person from going through that experience, or that young adolescent who could really be impressionable, how do we change the narrative and change the conversation, is by sending as much information as we can back. The reality is that primary care providers and GPs are they're the gatekeepers of our healthcare system. And so they will be your first point of contact in this conversation for the most part. So we have been trying our hardest to be able to give them information and help them become more comfortable in having the conversation, but they're not there yet. A lot of them are not there yet. And so this is where your own advocacy to please send me to someone else. Here's a list of people. There's a obesity locator on Obesity Canada. If you just Google it, type in your postal code, here are the people that you surround you that can support you. And then the biggest thing is circle back to your family doctor or your primary care provider to say, like, hey, this is the treatment that they've suggested. What do you think about it? Can you help follow me through? Because I think that's how you actually change things down the road.
Mm. Absolutely. I think you're very right in that, and I've said it earlier today as well. But we can't be what we don't see, so we need to help
Mm.
everybody join us in this moment, and we need to make the space and the grace for everybody to get new information and change maybe how they practice or change how they speak to themselves. I
Mm-hmm.
think that those are both really important things, and I love Lauren, who was one of our first speakers today. I love you. You're a doctor, but you're still just a people. And you were kind of steeped in the
Yeah.
same, diet culture soup as the rest
Yeah.
of us. And that can be hard to undo. But knowing that there are people like you out there that are open to these conversations and making space, so empowering them with information as well, I think is really
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
So the flip of that, as a doctor working in this space, how do you change the perception of a patient who does not understand that obesity is a chronic disease and believes that the struggles are all their own fault?
Yes, yes. So this is the internalized bias, right? That we were
Mm,
talking about. It's the negative experiences. It's I did it before. Why can't I do it again? Or my neighbor, and I are doing this, and they're losing weight, and I'm not, right? So it's like you're constantly getting this feedback of it's my fault because obviously it works for somebody else.
mm,
And so for me, as a healthcare provider, there's two concepts that I would sort of use in this conversation. One is this concept of readiness to change, right? So a lot of the time, we as healthcare providers are looking at the overall picture in a completely different way than the patient is because we're looking at data points and looking at it from a medical perspective. Do they have high blood pressure and prediabetes and, high cholesterol? Well, obesity is probably something that we should talk about, but the patient may not be ready. Right. And so that's where this concept of the 5 A's, in how we approach obesity, the first one is asking permission. And it's kind of a funny thing for healthcare providers because we have such a relationship with our patients to ask permission. It just doesn't seem intuitive. But when it comes to weight, it's something that they may not be ready to talk about. But if you don't ask, it will never be broached. So it is our duty to put it out there to say, hey, is weight something that you've ever thought about? Is that something that you'd like support with? And if the answer is no, I'm good, that's the answer. And I don't
mm.
think that we should give people the ability to have their right to say, I don't want to talk about this. But that's not where the door or the chapter closes. It keeps the therapeutic relationship open. The next time you see them, I'm just wondering, is it something that you'd like to have a chat about at this point? How are you feeling? The answer is no. The answer is no. But, I think it is our duty to ask and to leave that door open. Most of the time, for example, if I'm seeing somebody in my office for a different reason and I'm bringing up obesity and asking permission, to be honest, most of the time, patients are very grateful to have the
Mm.
conversation and just to sort of when you ask permission, it invites patients to be comfortable with the conversation. It already breaks down the barrier because you've asked the permission, you've invited them in, as opposed to telling them, that this is a problem and what needs to be done about it. So I do think words matter. I think understanding their readiness to change and respecting that is very important. And then that asking permission piece is like the key for you to open up that therapeutic window.
I love that. And you're right.
Mhm.
We're all just people. trying to figure this out.
Exactly.
And I love that that is the first day. Let's like just ask that permission and gauge what that looks like. And it also invites the opportunity to plant a little seed on the
Yes.
healthcare practitioner side as well to be like, I'm here. And there's some really interesting new developments as well. So if you're ever interested in talking, come, I got
Hmm.
you. And
Yeah.
then, as Ian and I were talking about at the top as well, with the clinical practice guidelines, there's really an opportunity here to do top down. So, yes, we want that information to hit the doctors directly, but bottom up, there is no harm in us going into conversations armed with, we have some great resources available online that people can
Hmm.
take into the conversation. And to your point, even just identifying the clinics that maybe, or the referrals that we're looking to go to, because it can be too much for some GPs to try and get all of that
Yeah.
information in as well. So let's all be
Absolutely.
kind to each other, right? What a concept.
Yeah,
What a time to be
exactly,
alive.
exactly. I think everyone is sort of, at least when we talk to family doctors, they're overwhelmed, right? And I
Yeah.
can understand that, and I appreciate it. But they also know that they need to do something. So if you
Hmm.
can come to that conversation already prepared with what is it that you would prefer to be done, if the family doctor themselves can't help, I actually think that improves the relationship.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Yeah, and there's a lot to be said as well with physicians, even just having the kinds of conversations or helping everybody understand how they can make their clinic environments more welcoming, and just even starting there can help. Knowing
Yeah.
that there's a chair without arms that someone can sit in, that I'm not going to have to yell down the hall, who's got the bigger cuff? Those
Right.
things matter. I'm sorry they
100%.
did. Like, I'm not even sorry. I didn't know why I said that. I'm not sorry at all. Those are the little things that we can start with for sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll just add one more point is
Mhm.
from our perspective, educating medical students and residents is a huge uh, point that we're really taking on to, because it's hard to change behavior and it's hard to change bias, but if you can educate somebody while they're learning, as this is what it
Mhm.
is, there is actually no bias started in the first place. That to me is a huge game changer, because they're starting their clinical practice off in the right foot. They know their clinic needs to have those supports for all patients. That's just baseline standard of care. That's really
Yeah.
what we need to move to.
Oh, it's happening. It's happening.
Mhm.
All right, let's go to another question here. Are processed foods as bad as cigarettes from a public health point of view?
Wow, that's a very
Mm,
great question. I mean, I'm going to talk completely opinion because I don't really have the science to back it
fair.
up, but I think it's worse by far, because we know cigarettes cause cancer, but you don't have to smoke to live. And the
Mm,
reality where around processed food is that it's the cheapest, most filling foods, and probably there is very little foods that are not processed that are even available at this point. So we're now dealing with something that is a staple need for survival, and we're converting it into something that's negatively impacting our health. That's the equivalent of like changing our water, right?
mm,
Smoking is totally different. It is sort of, yes, you could have a higher predisposition to addictive properties and things like that. But at the end of the day, you don't need to smoke to live. At the end of the day, you have to choose your food to survive. And so I think it's completely worse. I also think that the outcomes of ingesting processed food are far worse biologically. It affects every cell in our body compared to smoking. Yes, there is still negative impacts, but it's not as sort of whole body as I think
mhm.
processed food is. So, to me, it's actually a worse thing.
We'll take that as opinion 100%. And I tend to
Yes.
agree, my friend, as well. Um, I would like to understand, this is the question, I would like to understand why some people are still hungry after a bariatric surgery, even
Mm.
when they're monitoring their proteins and their macros, and others might not be hungry anymore.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's because everybody's biology is different, and everyone's outcome to treatment is going to be different. And so, what I mean by that is, after bariatric surgery, depends on the type of surgery, but most surgeries reduce your hunger hormone and increase your fullness hormone. The extent to which that happens in your body could be different from one person to the other. And so, many people after bariatric surgery still need medication treatment to be able to improve symptoms of hunger. And that's not because the surgery was done incorrectly or that surgery wasn't the right tool for you. It's just that your hormone level perhaps wasn't increased as much as the next person. There's also lots of really interesting data on the microbiome and gut bacteria. And, it is far more complicated. All of these things actually affect our hormones that affect our appetite system. So it is everyone is truly such a different, complex being that everyone's going to be different when it comes to different treatments. But you're not alone if you're sort of had bariatric surgery and you continue to have symptoms of hunger. That's a phenomenon that we absolutely know exists. That's why obesity is a chronic disease. Bariatric surgery doesn't cure. There's still treatment and long-term sort of follow-up that's needed after surgery for this exact reason.
Mm. So true. And I know we keep coming back to it, but it really is about how personal and individualized this is on so many levels, given the different factors, our genetics, all of those kinds of things. And we're
For
so
sure.
used to living in this society that should be either black, white, or you need to fit in this box and only this box. And sorry,
Well,
I don't
I
fit in the
mean,
box
look
you're
at
putting
look
me
at the number of blood pressure medications we have available.
in. Yeah.
There's a reason why we have over 20 different options. It's because not all blood pressure medications treat blood pressure for the exact same reason that everyone has a
Hmm.
different reason why their blood pressure is high. You try one, yes, it works. It doesn't work. You try a different one. It's the same as any other chronic disease. It's just with this conversation, we're sort of relearning that.
Hmm. Big time. All right, the last one's a little bit spicy, but I think we got time to go here. Obesity is a big business for drug companies, and a lot of MDs involved with Obesity Canada and otherwise have some funding from pharma. How do
Yep.
you address this conflict?
Thank you for bringing that up because we actually don't get a chance to actually talk about that. And it's something that is, in the air, especially now with social media and things like that.
Hmm.
I think everyone as a healthcare provider, it's a personal choice with how much they're willing or going to be engaged with pharmaceutical companies. But at the end of the day, there's a partnership because they are the ones that are making the medication. They are also the ones that typically fund education. So when we talk about discussions with doctors and things like that, how are we reasonably going to be able to do that? Somebody needs to fund it, right? So hopefully, our government can take that on or academic institutions can take that on, but the reality is they don't. And so we end up having to partner with, pharmaceutical companies or other people that are in this space. However, if that partnership does occur, transparency is of utmost importance, right? Who is paying for this? Where is it coming from? What drug are they manufacturing? Where am I getting this information? Who made these slides? Like all of these things are up
Yeah.
front and center if that's the case. So I think that's a really important one. At the end of the day, like it's I don't want to brush it off, but it's the same as diabetes. It's the same as high blood pressure. Like pharmaceutical companies are making these treatments. We in just in the same way of type 2 diabetes, we're prescribing the medication that is the best for the patient, but at the end of the day somebody funded that medication. So I think the due diligence is on us as healthcare providers to create a space and a barrier to understand bias. There's going to be inherent bias anytime somebody's funding you, but it's our job to make sure that we understand that bias and disclose it and be transparent whenever you're listening to something, who's funding it, where is that coming from, and who's been impacted by it. So like our slides today, my presentation today, that was 100% me. I had no disclosures because, that was coming just from me. So those kind of things matter.
Hmm. I agree completely. And it's a topic that we hear a fair bit in our patient community as well. And I think fair question,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely fair question. What I know to be true as well, and this is my experience with everybody that I've encountered at Obesity Canada, to your point, very transparent and
Mm-hmm.
also very recognized that this work matters. These are humans that are invested in tracking to solutions and support for this
Yeah.
cohort of humans that are living with obesity. So let's assume positive intent as well. And I also know from all of the physicians that I've had the experience of interacting with that they are committed to doing this right as well. And they're not over prescribing. They're not, doing this the wrong way. And that's another really important factor to consider here is the high, amazing caliber of humans that we have
Right.
in Obesity Canada, like yourself, that are doing this work and
Yeah,
making change. So
for
thank you
sure.
so much for that. Look at me, right nose on time.
Ah,
Boomsies.
yeah.
I love it.
That was
Thank you so much,
awesome.
Megan. This is
For
fantastic.
sure.
Appreciate everything that you brought for us today. And yeah, thank you for putting everything
For
together.
sure.
Very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Great questions,
Always.
everyone.